Hello, everyone. Hopefully, everyone's having a wonderful November. Scooting on up, getting ready for the holidays. We're not too far away from Thanksgiving and Christmas. We have now also passed Ignite, so we actually have a huge list of stuff to discuss today. We're going to kind of go through and I think focus on the highlights today. They'll give us more stuff to talk about in the future, but hopefully everyone's been doing good. I know we took a week off a little bit ago because Ignite was going on, but Tamara, Tom, and I are super excited to go over some of the roadmap updates for you. So I'm going to actually go ahead and look for Tamara to start off. As a quick reminder before we get going, guys, we'll have in development, rolling out, and launched is the three sections, and then we may cover some canceled stuff at the end. In development means it's just been added to the roadmap. They're going through and starting to do it. We have a lot in there this week because we just went through Ignite. Rolling out means it's somewhere in the release cycle, whether it's in first release for people that are going out and want to get their hands on it, or whether it's all but launched. And launched means everyone, at least in the scoped cloud, should have it. So with that said, Tamara, you want to go ahead and get us started with your awesome classes today?
Sure. Thank you. I saw something on here that made me want to highlight it in a different color than all the other things that I'm highlighting on this list because it made me so excited I wanted to touch on it. And that is Microsoft Lists, a board view. So you can view your list items in a board with swim lanes that represent the current progress. So I am really excited about that. And that is coming out to GCC, DoD, GCC High, and worldwide. That's supposed to be coming out in the end of November. So I'm very excited about that. And then there's just so much to choose from. The other thing that I thought was great in Microsoft Lists is improved lookup fields. So you can create lookup fields now in a modern list UI and no setting page is required. This means that you can program a list item or column to look up another set of data of pre-populated managed choices. And this is coming out to worldwide, GCC High, GCC, and DoD, again, the end of November. And then the last thing I'm going to touch on is in Microsoft Lists again, packaging list templates with Power Platform and rules. So Microsoft is pleased to announce new capabilities for custom list templates. As you design and define custom list templates, you can now program in Power Platform app experiences and list rules to be pre-created for use when a new list gets created. So note, you will continue to be able to manage which templates are available to which people based on their job role for both custom list templates and Microsoft provided templates. Now we're going to have to wait until next year for that. That's due out in January. And again, that's due out in January for DoD, GCC, GCC High, and the worldwide tenant. So those are my top three of in development.
I thought it was kind of funny because they added a ton of stuff in development, and like a third of them just don't have a launch date yet. Like they added the point, but there's not actually a launch date yet because it's all the new things that they just announced. Tom, why don't you go ahead and pick it up from there? I know there's a ton of different topics to talk about. What were you excited about looking at the list?
Well, since my fiance told me I could only do 3 because I get so excited.
Wait, Tom. We'll let you do 4, buddy. We'll let you do 4.
Well, actually, I'm going to do 5 because 2 of them.
Okay, we'll let you do 5. And,
and it's all on the same topic. So there, I almost thought, it's all about Microsoft Stream. That can be 1. So
that's how I'm doing it, Tom.
There you go. Thank you. So in Microsoft Stream, there's a few changes that are coming out. They are set for March of 2022. And then the 2 additional ones I'll talk about once I'm done with those 3 are actually for May of 2022. So it's kind of pushing out there. But one is Microsoft Stream. They're going to allow commenting on a video or audio file in SharePoint and OneDrive. So this is the new Stream, not the classic one. And it says builds on top of the existing comments found in OneDrive.
Pause for a second. What do you mean when you say the new Stream, Tom, for people that maybe didn't watch Ignite?
Okay, so classic Stream was you type in web.microsoft.com, you put your videos out there. They're actually stored in Azure. And it had a series of things that you could do with it in that particular scenario. What they've done now is the new stream or the modern stream actually stores this videos in either a SharePoint site, depending on how you do your recording, or it stores it in OneDrive. And so
which is going to give people a ton more space, which is awesome.
Exactly, because you were kind of limited on the amount you could use within Azure. So you now have more space. You have the ability to do sharing much more intuitive than what you had before.
Same way you do it with everything else. Basically.
Same way you do with anything else that's in SharePoint. So there's some cool things. They're trying to get the feature parity from what the old stream was to the new stream. They're getting really close. So a lot of the stream things you see coming out now, you're like, well, we already had that. Well, you had it in the old one, but not the new one. Now you got it in the new one. So with this particular one, all these are for the new stream offering. This is going to allow you to do commenting, and it builds on top of the existing comments found in OneDrive and SharePoint Online, but presents these comments with a new Office look and feel within the player. So it's like the modern commenting that you see in so many things that are coming out right now. Feature allows users with view permissions, so people who can look at it but they can't do anything edit-wise to it, they can leave a comment. Users that have edit permissions can @mention others, which is really nice because then you can call somebody's attention to it. So these are both default changes in behavior in terms of permissions for video and audio files. That is across the board: OneDrive, Stream, SharePoint, Worldwide, GCC High, DoD, and GCC. Second one is record a new video on the stream start page in Office. So if you did go out to web.microsoft.com for seeing your stream stuff, users can create a new video directly from the stream start page on office.com by recording their webcam or screen. The new video is then uploaded to OneDrive and ready to share. Again, it just makes it really easy if you're going out there and saying, hey, I want to go ahead and record something real quick. I can do it from the equivalent of like Word starting, a Word screen, or am I starting my Excel screen? Now you start your stream screen and you can do a video. It puts it out to your OneDrive and life is grand. Again, worldwide, DoD, GCC High, and GCC. And the last one of my three, and this one's really cool, you can add chapters to help viewers find the right part of a video. So users with edit access to a video uploaded to SharePoint, OneDrive, Teams, and Yammer can now add chapters to help viewers identify information in the video. For each chapter, you can specify a point in time in the video and title of that chapter, which will then show up in the table of contents side pane for the video, as well as the video timeline. I think that is freaking awesome.
You can I see huge ramifications for internal training videos and stuff like that.
Oh gosh, yes. I mean, here's a topic on everything you need to know about OneDrive. And you can say, okay, chapter 1, blah, chapter 2, blah, and people can just pop to what they need to have instead of you having to do 15 different videos to grab it all. Again, I think brilliant. This is awesome.
Yeah.
And once again, this is OneDrive, SharePoint, Microsoft Stream, DoD, GCC High, Worldwide, and GCC. There's two other ones that are more specific to the government because they're kind of called out. One, they record a new video on the stream start page in Office for government clouds. They actually called this one out separately. And it's the same thing that I talked about earlier, being able to record the video directly from the stream start screen. That one's going to be in May of 2022 and will be GCC, GCC High, and DoD. And then the preview of new video start page on Office for GCC High and DoD, that is supposed to come out in May of 2022. So again, GCC High and DoD, it doesn't say GCC. So I don't know if GCC is being included in another rollout on this one. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but keep in mind, Stream is getting love across the board for all the different tenants that you have out there. So good stuff on Stream, and I think I technically kind of played by the rules and kept it to 3.
Sure, I'm going to come back and ask your guys' opinion on something else anyway. So
Okay.
I'll discuss a couple first. I'm going to kind of cheat in the way that Tom implied. So to give you guys an idea, there's like 97 updates in development. So there's a ton of stuff to talk about. What I kind of figured I'd do is pick some themes and talk about a specific update inside of there. As you go through and look, you'll hit a period of like 10 updates that are all related to the same thing. The first one I wanted to point out that I thought was pretty cool. There's actually a decent amount of updates coming through for the Compliance Center. We've talked about Compliance Center updates. There's been a lot of stuff with insider risk management that is still continuing to be updated. A friendly reminder, insider risk management is you covering your own ass as a company, making sure you don't have people that are being sexist, that are being misogynistic, that are harassing other employees, stuff like that. It's basically making sure that your employees are playing nice with each other. But one in particular that I thought was kind of cool, what they're going to start doing with the Compliance Center is make it easier to go and find historical versions in advanced e-discovery. So when you go through and you set up versioning on OneDrive or SharePoint, you always had the ability to go through and make sure you're retaining historical versions. Well, now by default, when you go through and you do your advanced e-discovery search, it's going to be essentially discovering stuff from historical versions as well. Now, oftentimes those documents may be very similar, but you definitely can have situations where maybe you were originally talking about thing X and it got removed and you weren't talking about it before. I actually see this as a big win. I've gone through and worked with some customers before that have had to go in when they're being sued or going into litigation and find historical information, and getting all of that information out and making sure you're reviewing it properly and going through, just having everything show up in the search of advanced e-discovery is actually pretty cool. So that's one of the many updates that are coming to the Compliance Center and in the development in this week's roadmap updates, but one in particular that I thought was cool.
Adam, do the versions show up associated with the published document, or do they show up as separate records?
So I believe, and I haven't tried this myself, I believe that they will basically show up in the search now almost as separate records, but you'll still see them associated with the document. But rather than being like one thing that has it, that's how it was historically, right? You'd see the most recent one and you'd know there's other versions there, but if you wanted to go through and see the other versions, there's a lot more work. I would imagine they're going to basically show up as their own separate thing in Compliance Center now, but you'll just be able to identify that they're previous versions, so you know that they're ultimately historical content. That's how I read it, just because that would be the opposite of how it used to do, which would make it easier for me. So that's what I assume. We'll have to actually test it out. Obviously, in development, I can't test it yet, but that's what I would assume it's going through. The next section that I wanted to talk about was cool. There's a whole bunch of updates for teams. I can't go into all of them. There's seriously about 15 of them with a whole bunch of cool stuff. But one that I could actually see myself using, they're adding chat with self in teams. And why this might seem a little silly at the forefront of it, the idea is how often you're doing something like you need to send yourself a little note. I am the king of like throwing something in my OneNote or pulling up Notepad and typing something in there, or putting something in my Teams chat team that's really meant for myself. Well, you can actually now literally message yourself in Teams and basically use it as like a little notepad, a little thing that you can do like if you need to remind yourself, which I thought was super cool. If you're just going through and you need to temporarily hold a temporary password or something like that, you'll be able to do that in Teams with yourself, which again, like right now I do that anyways, but just through other tools. The fact that I'll be able to do that in Teams I thought was pretty cool, so I wanted to highlight that one. And then
I agree with you. That's gonna be something I will use quite frequently, actually.
Yeah, again, kind of silly, but like legitimately I will use that. So there was a lot of updates as well in the Intune and endpoint management side. I have a newfound respect for this. So my team's been growing at Planet. We've been adding more people. I've basically been stealing all the good people that I was buddies with at Rackspace. But one of the guys that I added onto my team is a guy named Angel, and what his specific subject matter expertise is in endpoint management and in device management and stuff like that. And I've always been comfortable with the mobile device side, but Windows is just kind of like, I don't really want to mess that. But he's been going pretty deep into that side, knows it really, really well. But because of that, we've been doing that with a lot more of our customers recently. So I started to see the wide-reaching implications it can have if you can really get on top of what you're doing with your device management policy. We're working with a hospital right now that has all sorts of crazy, well, this is a computer that's shared by nurses at a nursing station, and this is personal. But anyways, a lot of updates updates coming to Intune and endpoint management, and one in particular that I thought was kind of cool. So anyone who has Apple products or has an iPhone knows that Apple's model is almost entirely identity centric. When you go through, you have an Apple ID, you sign in with your Apple ID, and that controls everything, right? You go through and you want to set up a new phone. Well, if you set it up properly, when you get a new phone, you can just sign in with your Apple ID and it has all of your information there and stuff.
Yeah.
They are actually now integrating that when you're going through and looking at what Intune and endpoint management can do, where basically if you go in through and you have Apple devices, they are going to be able to add new devices into your endpoint management based off of like Apple IDs. So if you're going through and you want to add in your personal phone for devices into like a company system, rather than potentially in the past it'd be you had to download the company portal app, you had to go through the registration process, you had to log in with your Office 365 login, stuff like that. Well, now if you know the Apple ID of the people that are going through and doing it, you can actually go, I believe reading this, you can actually go into endpoint management and actually add them in that way based on their Apple ID, which is basically taking the way that Apple approaches stuff, which already has a whole bunch of that value information, and merging it into Microsoft, which I thought was cool. That was really neat to go through because, again, like I see this as Microsoft meeting Apple halfway, and that already works really well with Apple devices, and especially if you have you have an iPad and an iPhone and a Mac and everything, all of that is integrated in based off of your Apple ID. So the fact that you can go through and start doing this, I thought was pretty cool. So I wanted to actually ask you guys, there's two other sections that we didn't really hit on. One, I'll throw this to you first, Tom. There was a ton of updates on Viva as well. We all know, we've talked about a little bit how important Viva is going to be to Microsoft's approach and how they see their future growth. Now, I think probably the hardest barrier of entry of Viva right now is probably the cost point, but I would imagine that will eventually change long term. Was there anything with all the updates from Ignite and specifically the stuff we're seeing in this roadmap that jumped out to you with Viva?
This is where I have to admit, part of me is still like, yeah, one of these days. Because
well, it's so expensive per user right now. Like, I think it's a cool product, but
and the thing is, the people who seem to be most on board with Viva, which I would expect, are people who are consultants or, people who work for firms that are hired by other firms to make these things happen. I'm a little different in this group of normally 4, only 3 this time, where I actually work for a company that is not a vendor. It's not a contracting firm. So I approach a lot of this from, how does this affect my work life and my internal business customers? And quite honestly, Viva's really not on the roadmap. We've got a learning management system, so Viva Learn doesn't necessarily come into play. The whole go find the content type thing, cost-wise, that's not going to play. The only thing that we're really looking at is, the free Viva Insights that, tell you, hey, you want to close down your day, you want to do this. And we do have a group that's coming through and saying, hey, we want to run a quick pilot to have a certain set of managers who can see consolidated inputs as to how their team's doing. How does that work with potential best practices and stuff like that? I noticed that there was a change, and I have to scroll back up, and I probably didn't highlight it, so I'm not going to waste that time. But I saw that they are changing that somewhat. And while it still looks like you're going to be able to do much of the same thing, the one thing that kind of stood out was it used to be that you only got those consolidated highlights if you had 5 or more people. Now it basically says you'll do it if you have 1. I'm like, ooh, wow, that.
I wonder who made those comments.
Yeah, that's anonymity at its finest.
But it's all anonymous.
Yeah, all anonymous. Yeah, I don't know who submitted this
I
one
think
item.
Viva's gonna have. I think Viva's gonna have every partner that I went through and I originally showed analytics and delve to when it first launched was very much a what the junk type reaction.
Right.
I think Viva's going to have a little bit of an uphill climb for that. Where I potentially see the value, and I don't know, like I am in the consultant space, obviously, as what Tom was saying, but I am very much in the consultant space of I don't care about this unless I have a client that wants it. Like if I
Exactly.
don't have a client that wants it, I'm not
You're
really
not selling it.
yeah, I don't really have a vested interest in pushing something. The one thing I do think that could be beneficial with Viva, I'm really interested in the categorizing and profile cards and stuff like that that it's doing in Outlook. I think that Viva has the chance of making organizations that depend on collaboration better than they may be otherwise, because like, I mean, perfect example, I've been struggling I recently had an Azure guy start on my team, and he's great, he's super smart, but he hasn't been working here for almost 5 years like I have. So he doesn't know the various people that he can go through and talk to, the people that know the different types of resources. And so I kind of have to step in and play like matchmaker for him from times. If oh, I have a client that needs to talk about this, I'm like, oh, well, you should talk to blah, blah, blah. He knows this really well. I could see Viva filling in that hole to a large degree of going through and showing, hey, this person has this type of information, this expertise is what they're working on. So I think that could be cool. So Tamara, I'll bring you into the second half of this. The other major thing that's really hit on pretty heavily at the bottom, I think both you guys are going to be interested here, is all the SharePoint syntax stuff. So do y'all want to talk a little bit about what's different with SharePoint syntax and just SharePoint updates, and why we're seeing so much love from Microsoft in this area?
Before we go on to that, I just
Sure.
wanted to say with the Microsoft Viva stuff, the things that have got me a little excited about it are the engagement analytics. So you put all this stuff out there and you're hoping that somebody's clicking on it and getting some use out of it, but hoping does not make it so. So getting the engagement analytics, I think, helps. And then using the metadata and the navigation that's coming in March of 2022, I think is going to make it easier for people to discover those unknown unknowns.
Yeah.
And is going to help make it better.
Make people collaborate better. Yeah, no,
yeah,
for sure.
Yeah.
And again, I don't know if I'm willing to pay $10 a user for that, but I think the core concept of what it does and what it can do long term is super valuable.
That is a little steep.
Oh yeah, so anyway, so the SharePoint syntax, what do you guys want to kind of high level, what's the difference between SharePoint syntax when you see an update related to that from SharePoint as a whole, from someone like myself who's maybe not super into SharePoint itself?
Yeah, so I'll start and then Tamara can come in and tell me, why didn't you let me talk? The thing that I run into with syntax, and again, this is from, I'm in a company and we'd have to consider buying it, not can I get up to speed so I can sell it to somebody. Again, it's a cost thing. And when they talk about, hey, you can try a trial demo and run some of your documents through it and build models and the whole bit. I remember seeing some people discuss this on Twitter, and they were like, in order for you to get a really solid model, you have to apply it to a fair number of documents. And if you're only doing a small sample size, you may not be getting a true representation of what's going to happen. So again, I think these are cool things. The cost, though, just in tight budgets and stuff, to say, hey, you'd like to spend $10 per person per month for 5,000 people to do this, wouldn't you? And the answer is always no. So I think as this continues to become a core functionality and becomes more commonplace, I think then the discussion in my situation is going to change. It's like, hey, we can do this. Are you interested? But at this stage, it's still new and expensive, and the company really doesn't have anything driving the need to adopt this. So that's kind of where I sit on a lot of the syntax. I would love to play with it. I'd love to do stuff with it. I just don't think I can sell that at this stage of the game internally to my internal customers.
So Tamara, I know you work with a ton of customers that use SharePoint heavily. What were your thoughts seeing all the updates on syntax and what it does?
Well, I think it's great that they're investing in it. But again, if you don't have a big enough data set, it's not really going to help you that much. So one of the key differences...
How does searching for metadata help you if you don't have 200,000 documents?
Right, exactly. So I mean, SharePoint is this huge platform, and SharePoint syntax is just one of the tools in the toolbox that you can use. It's like walking into Home Depot. If SharePoint were Home Depot, SharePoint syntax would be a tool on the shelf in Home Depot. And what it does is it uses advanced AI and machine teaching to amplify human experiences. It automates content processing so it can follow a pattern, and then transforms content into knowledge. Now, what that means, I'm not quite sure, but that's one of the key differences, is that SharePoint is the platform, it is a set of tools, and SharePoint syntax is one of those tools that are available. So I think if you're looking at a larger organization, I think it makes sense to use the AI, but you also have to understand that SharePoint syntax on its own isn't going to do anything. You actually have to teach it or give it some models to work after. So that's just another thing to consider. Buying the application or buying the tool is not going to make you work any faster until you take the time to teach it. So that is another big part of syntax.
Sure.
A couple things that we also run into is, one, do we have pre-existing tools in our company that do those things? So like for the automation processing type stuff, like, wow, this would be really cool. Well, we've already got another platform package that does that. And if you're talking about syntax to say, hey, we want to feed in these contracts that then can have metadata attached to them based on what it learns from the contracts, the question then comes back is, why are you storing these contracts in SharePoint? They should be in this contract management system over here that is not Microsoft related. So there's a lot of that going on if you're trying to bring in a new Microsoft feature that's being covered in some other package that's non-Microsoft. And that's kind of what we run into at times also.
One of the nice things, though, is you can streamline your costs by
True.
getting rid of that third-party system and putting it all in a platform that you already have and that is accessible to e-discovery.
Exactly.
So, and I think that's where we'll see this develop over time. A lot of the work that my team does with clients right now is, we made the commitment and went to Office 365 2 years ago. They have tool sets that theoretically have parity with other tools we're using. We need to get an understanding if that's something that truly can replace it. Is it a better experience? What are the cost differences, stuff like that? And we help them to evaluate that. So is anything else you guys want to talk about? There was one that I thought was funny that like I have to point out before we move on. Anything else you wanted to mention?
Go for it.
Redesigned modern font picker.
Yes, that was kind of interesting.
Yeah, so this is one of those things for the people that care about this. I'm sure they super care. I was just kind of giggling when I saw this. The update is, picking your fonts just got much easier. Microsoft Office Modern Font Picker is a completely reimagined experience for Office. Pin your favorite fonts so you can quickly access them on any device or platform. Easily view all the fonts used in a document, including notifications for missing and embedded fonts. Choose from all available styles for a font family, and this is what got me. Whether simply bold or italic, or more exotic variants such as condensed semi-bold italic. So basically, if you care about your fonts, I can see people in design or marketing and stuff like that, they have a whole new experience to make that easier, to allow you to do favorites and stuff like that. But it killed me whenever I read the or more exotic experience such as semi-condensed bold italic. And it was just like, I know those are 4 words, but I have no idea what that means together.
I think this is going to be really helpful, though, when you're cannibalizing information that you already have and you're copying and pasting it into a single document to build a new document, to use that checker to make sure that your font is consistent throughout the entire document.
Good point.
So that you don't look like an idiot when you present it.
Yeah, for sure. Anybody have anything else?
Nope.
Yeah, I didn't think font picking was that hard to begin with.
No, but you could tell who wrote that update like super cares about it. Like yes. Whoever wrote that description for that update was like very excited about that feature.
Behind that update.
This description brought to you by the party that gave you golden folders. Here you come, font pickers.
All right, so let's move on to rolling out. Tom, you want to go first since we let Tamara go first in development?
Sure. I'm just going to grab a couple that are the Microsoft Forms entries that we see out here. And there's not all that many that are in rolling out. One is the ability to manage and organize your fonts and forms and quizzes now. I've got fonts on the brain. I wonder why. This is to give you the ability when you go into forms.microsoft.com to just not see rows and rows and rows and rows of quizzes and fonts that are, God, fonts. This is bad. Why did you talk about fonts?
I'm sorry.
No, you're not. Quizzes and polls that are just randomly scattered around. Now you're going to be able to categorize them and manage them. I think that's an awesome change. I keep looking forward to hit our tenant. As of yesterday, it wasn't there. It could be out there now. I will go check after this call. The other one is when you're using Microsoft Forms for polling, yeah, that was fine, but they were also talking about the fact that in Teams, you did a lot with polling. So what they've actually now done is they've released a discoverable app called Polls in Teams. It's basically still Forms, but it's just giving you this new Polls app, which is the same experience as before via the Forms app, but now it's under a new app name and team branded icon. So for people who are doing a lot of the polls within their Teams meetings and stuff like this will make it a little bit easier to focus just on the aspect of polling within your meeting, not quizzes or whatever else that you're dealing with. So I think those are two good changes. The new polling app was supposed to be out in October, and the Forms Manage and Organize is for November.
Tamara?
SharePoint Spaces embed web part. So now you can show SharePoint pages or HTML embedded content as an interactable, which is like my new favorite word. Interactable overlay on the SharePoint Spaces. And this is rolling out in November, so this month, to DoD, worldwide, GCC High, GCC, and Germany. So I think it's going to be nice to be able to embed that HTML content. I don't know of many people in like DoD, GCC High, and GCC that are using Spaces.
Yeah, that's one of those things that I know it was a big thing in Ignite like 2 years ago, but it just doesn't seem like it's hit the traction yet.
Yeah, I know that City of Minneapolis has been using something like SharePoint Spaces. They've actually been using I think it's Xbox. Wow. To do like setting up blocks that represent different buildings and using that during the pandemic for the comment phases for different construction projects. So people, instead of being able to walk the site because of the pandemic, people were able to view a virtual site with accurate measurement representation.
Cool.
Sure.
So there's that. Also, the Microsoft Teams support of guest users with credentials managed by the host tenant. So this is support of internal guest users with credentials managed by the resource tenant, formerly known as State 3 and State 4 guest accounts. So this is going to be really important, especially for the DoD and GCC High, where people get posted like every 2 years to a different assignment, and they have to go from tenant to tenant. So I think this is really going to make it a lot easier to manage that without having to get a whole new license for that tenant.
Very
It's
cool.
definitely cool. The one I saw, this actually made me think of an old client I worked with in Australia. But a cool update for Microsoft Teams, they call it branch office survivability on Teams phones. And what it essentially means is if you are using Teams phone, which has a PSTN calling is doing like basically your phone, your work phone is now done through Teams. Essentially, even if a branch office internet goes down, because they have the PSTN backbone, which connects them to the core voice side of what Teams Voice is doing, you can actually
Did you say back phone or bat phone?
backbone.
Backbone. Okay. I thought you said backbone, and I'm like, this just got a whole lot more interesting.
Commissioner Gordon, uses his bat phone to call out for help.
Mhm.
But yeah, so because you have this core PSTN backbone that connects the branch office back to the main system in Office 365, even if the internet goes down at the branch office, they'll still be able to call internally in their organization to other people, like make phone calls successfully, which makes sense. If you think about it, if you lost internet, that wouldn't affect your office phones back in the day. Skype actually had this functionality if you actually did PSTN calling through Skype. And interestingly enough, I worked with an oil and gas company out in Australia, and this was one of the points that made them very reluctant to move off of their dedicated Skype infrastructure, was because if they embraced the cloud and moved to it, everything was internet based. And for those of you who haven't been, the internet in Australia is shit. And so they were worried. They were worried about the fact that if the internet went down, essentially all work would stop. Whereas right then, while they may not have internet, they could still continue working, still continue having meetings and talking with people and stuff like that. So nice to finally see this functionality coming out. And it's kind of a cool thought when you think about it that, if you're in a branch office that has PSTN calling out to it, even if you lose internet, you'll still be able to call and converse with your colleagues, which again makes sense historically if you think about how work phones work. But the only reason that's working is because of the PSTN backbone that's in there. So pretty cool. All right. Well, I think that's probably it for rolling out. Launched is a little bit longer than rolling out. I guess we'll go ahead and say, Tamara, you want to start us out in launched?
Sure. Power BI is getting a lot of love in Microsoft Teams. So this is all launched with no release date. So you should have it in your tenant if you are on the commercial side. This is not for DoD, GCC, or GCC High, but in Microsoft Teams, enhanced Power BI app for Teams. This is in preview, and enhancements to Power BI apps for Teams will make it easier to discover data from across the organization and quickly create visualizations from Excel data sets right within Teams. So collaborate more effectively and make decisions based on real-time insight. It creates a centralized place for users to find and analyze data while enhancing usage of Excel and Teams with embedded channel, chat, and meeting experiences. And then also with Power BI, the stage view in chat. So share a link to a report that's already set to the view of the person that is sharing it. And also Power BI improved tab and channel experience. So that's just going to improve the look and feel and expanded view to see the visualization better, the data visualization. So all of that should be launched out to the commercial tenants now. And then if I have to do one more, because I can.
You're going to do the breakout room things, aren't you?
I am.
Go for it.
All right. There's a lot of love happening for breakout rooms. And what makes me so happy is this is for the commercial tenant and GCC, not GCC High or DoD. We're waiting for some love there. But you can assign a breakout room presenter support, so extend the management of breakout rooms to specific presenters. This means that you're going to have access to the meeting options. Access to meeting options for DoD is not going to be available until March of 2022. So this feature for DoD is probably not going to happen for a while yet. But then also, breakout room, pre-meeting room creation and participant assignment. You don't have to wait until everybody's in the meeting to assign them to a room. Yay, because that was a waste of time of people watching you click on stuff. So very excited about that. And again, that's GCC and worldwide. Okay, I'll be quiet now and let somebody else talk.
No, I was going to let you do the breakout rooms because I knew that was one thing that you're just thrilled to death about.
Oh, yeah. I'm presenting all the time.
Exactly. So I'm going to do one Teams and one Planner one. On Microsoft Teams, the Share to Microsoft Teams from Outlook. So this enables you to take emails that you have that are in Outlook for you and actually move into a Teams chat or Teams channel so you can continue the conversation in there. I think this is awesome. I know a lot of people are like, well, it should have been a chat to begin with. Yeah, should have been, but wasn't. So let's correct it now. So I think the ability to see something that was sent specifically to you, but really pertains to a larger group that happens to be part of the team, this is great for getting it back into a conversational mode where multiple people can weigh in, and they're weighing in on the same thing and taking in all the context of replies that have been made to that particular post. So I think that's great. That was launched. There's actually 2 different entries for this. I'm not sure what the differences are between them, but that should have been out in October. So you should have it in your client now because it's rolled out or it's launched. The other one, which is kind of cool that I don't remember seeing before, that was in Microsoft Planner. You can move tasks to any of your plans. So now you can move tasks to any plan you're a member of. Comments cannot move to a plan in a different group, and labels do not move. So if you've got Planner A and Planner B, and Planner A has a bucket called Project X, if you pull that task that's in Project X on Planner A into Planner B, it's not going to create a Planner X bucket if it's not there. You'll have to figure out where you're going to put it in there. But I think being able to go cross planner entries and move tasks around if you need to, I think that's a cool thing. It gives you the ability to do a lot more interplan type stuff. And especially if you're using Planner a lot for ongoing projects and you say, oh, well, yeah, that was in the wrong plan. I need to move this over. Just being able to drag and drop the thing over is great. So, or move it, whatever, however that works. But that's a good change that I'm looking forward to.
For sure. There's multiple things in launch. I won't spend too much time going over everything. There was a couple of things that I saw that I thought was cool. One in particular that I saw was with Microsoft Information Protection, they're adding data at rest encryption for Microsoft 365. This is in preview. It's only available for worldwide tenants. I really see this need more for my customers who have compliance needs. A lot of compliances want you to keep the data encrypted at rest. My one complaint with this, as you go through and look at it, the data at rest feature is somewhat limited on what will be encrypted at data at rest, specifically Microsoft Teams files, Teams chat messages, Teams media messages, and chat suggestions by Cortana, as well as team chat notifications. So it seems largely team-based, but so again, like I'll still take it. But the one thing that I didn't really like, once you turn on this feature, from that point forward, everything is going to be encrypted that you add in at data at rest. So this is now
past.
yeah. So this is coming out as a feature that I think is cool that people will need. But do you then have to then go in and re-upload everything you already have in your tenant? I would imagine Microsoft will eventually address this and eventually give you a way to do it. But right now, how it's written when you're going through and looking at the updates and what's listed and launched is you've gone through and created it. Now, moving forward, everything new uploaded in those areas I said would be there. But like, how many organizations are already fully deployed in 365 where, yeah, you don't go through and have
I can see it now in your documentation. You just have a line that says compliant as of
Yeah.
what date, and I'm like, that's not gonna fly.
Yeah, exactly. So, so regardless, I still think it's a cool feature. A lot of compliance needs ask that stuff be encrypted at rest, so I think it's a step in the right direction, but just not fully quite there. Anything else you guys want to mention from launched?
Nope, I'm good.
No, I'm good.
All right, so I'll briefly mention there were 3 things listed as canceled. Microsoft 365 Compliance Center Advanced Audit Mail Attachments events. The audit's been delayed. We're not going to spend time on it because it looks like it's coming back. Azure Active Directory Password Protection Enforced for all changes. And this is basically right now, if you go through and do password updates through the Graph API, they didn't have banned password enforcement. So if I didn't want my users to be able to use a password of password 123 or the name of my company or something like that, if they were using the Graph API to do it, that technically wasn't enforced. The idea around doing this would be to enforce that. I would like to eventually see this come back, but to be honest, I don't know how many people are actually using the Graph API to do it. Now, maybe if you're a large enough customer and you have your own dev staff, maybe you had an internal system that already let people change passwords and you're using the Graph API to pass those password changes to it. But if you're smart enough to have your own app that's allowing you to go through and do that, you can probably do some of that checking on your own anyways. So yeah, going through and seeing that. And then the final one was Microsoft 365 Compliance Center Advanced Audit. Teams reactions with messages, and basically this item was delayed as well, so I'm not going to spend too much time looking at it because it's eventually going to be back. So that's been our update for the pulse. There's a lot of things to talk about. I think it was a good show though. I actually really liked some of the conversations we had about some of the new things that they launched. Hopefully you guys found it interesting or helpful as well, and we'll see everyone next week.
Thanks everybody.